you know if you're codependent? Like, how do you, and if you're not okay with you, what do you do about that? Or how do you get there?
Say more.
I guess it could be like codependency with people, but it may be even just like other behaviors. Like for instance, like for me, if I'm in a relationship and then I don't have that relationship, I feel like I can't function. If I have been relying on cigarettes to deal with my emotions and I don't have any, I feel like I can't function. You know, and so it's basically, to me, it's like addiction, just to something that isn't necessarily a substance.
Yeah, it's using without dope. I mean, basically.
Yeah, like how do you get okay without basically like any crutches?
Okay. All right. Anything on your mind in this day and age? I mean, I always want to be what's people going on in their life at the time.
Right.
Anything going great? Anything going well? Anything that's...
My life's, it's going pretty good. I'm, working the steps. Diving into the 6th step is going to be like, I'm just reading through the basic text on it right now. And diving into that, in a meeting I went to last night, it's that changed behavior that's going to, And the other thing is one thing I'm struggling with is actually in my household is not making amends until you're ready.
Okay.
Not going on the apology tour because there's nothing behind it.
Yeah. So It's just empty promises as opposed to actually mending something.
Yes.
Okay, that's a good idea. So always I want to try to, if there's some pieces in the books that we can utilize, I want to do that in some way. But like Elyse, you were, obviously I think there's a personal tone to everything we talk about here because it's real shit that we're all going through. Codependency I think is I don't want to get very technical. I'm not a clinician and I'm not trying to play one. But like basically doing things for other people to the point that you hurt yourself. Or that it's damaging to you is always the way I've kind of thought about something codependent. Now I know there's a very clinical definition of this, and if you would like to know what that is, please consult your local psychiatrist or therapist. But I think, we all have to me it's kind of an attempt to use, something outside of me to try to fix something inside of me.
Right.
And, I think a lot of us in any stage of recovery can come in and get very vested in, a relationship or sex or, a substance or be, an activity, be it the gym or be it, anything where I'm just trying to use something external to try to make me feel better. So...
Yeah, even like just trying to, just like distraction. Like I feel like, addicts or no addicts, like our society thrives on distraction. Mm-hmm. And it's just another behavior to get out of like being with myself.
Yeah. Because I've seen, I actually did this myself, I come into a program of recovery and I'm trying to work on being a better version of me, and it's just like all of these feelings and emotions and thoughts and shit's coming up that I haven't fucked with in a long time, and then I see somebody cute walking, ooh, come here, you'll make me feel better. And it can be that, and we may, like how many of you guys have ever been in a relationship, and this is just sex for a few weekends, and then 5 years later you're like, how the fuck did I end up here? Because you can't, I don't know if it's biologically possible to disconnect what my physical body does to what my emotional and spiritual body gets connected to.
Yeah.
There's a way that we do that, and then, it's a little all over the place, but, then you end up seeing, I personally will have a bad habit of seeing somebody for who I want them to be, not who they actually are.
Right.
Yeah.
And and then I just keep chasing this illusion of who someone is.
And then you want to change that.
Yeah.
Right?
Let me
fix you. I'm not going to deal with me. Let me fix you.
Yeah, because if I fix you, then I'll have some self-worth because I made your life better.
I want to hear all your problems on day one so I can fix them moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, the inverse of that, of allowing people to do that to ourselves.
Sure.
But behind that to me is what is actually behind the curtain. Like I'm just really sure that we do a lot of things super unconsciously because it satisfies really deep-seated beliefs and needs that we have. That may not be so conscious.
Yeah, and sometimes those things are normally subconsciously running the bus, and I think there's something to be said about the overwhelm of having so many things going on all the time. We crave that, but then it also creates this level of stress where we can't. It's the stress is so overwhelming that it's I definitely can't look at me now.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of if I'm let's say if I'm feeling depressed, my depressed brain is not going to tell me to go do healthy things. It's going to tell me to turn on Netflix because that's all the energy and all the effort that I'm able to do at that point.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about this a little while ago of, our essentially primal emotions. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but, that something happened, Nick comes in and he does something to me that just either that I end up at pissed or afraid or anxious, but I don't look at what was really driving that. The initial effect is so quick. So, I come in here and he says, "You're just stupid." Now, does it have something to do with, that I'm actually stupid? No. But I hear that and I just go straight to pissed. Fuck you. That's not what it is. But what that initial feeling was oh, what if he's right? Or just it triggers every insecurity button that I've got. But I move through those insecurity buttons so rapidly that I don't notice the emotion that was actually behind it. And then I just go straight to my normal operating procedure, which is pissed off or shut down or fuck you and leave. And, I run right past it and I don't see what's actually driving my behaviors. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then God forbid somebody point that out to you. Oh, you're just feeling insecure. Mm-hmm. That's why you're reacting this way. We don't want to hear that.
Yeah. You're just insecure. Well, maybe I am, but fuck you anyway. I don't know if I can hear that. Right. Yeah. So this seems to hit, honestly, we're going to be freaking pretty honest in this little podcast. So is this something that's personally going on? It seems to have struck a very personal chord with you.
So, dating, anytime I am in a relationship, it seems that those, and I think it's because love is so important to humans, but that's what triggers my most deepest things. And
what is what triggers your most deepest things?
Just relationshiping.
Okay.
If I am just doing my own thing, I'm just doing my hobbies and work and all these things, I'm not being my heart's not being challenged. My heart's not being pushed. Mm-hmm. And that's where all my feelings of not being good enough or abandonment, that's where it all sits. Mm-hmm. And so anytime I'm trying to relationship, it's my heart is more sensitive to those things. And it's kind of if some of those things aren't healed, I might react in a certain way that I don't want to. And then the other person reacts to my reaction based on what's going on with them internally. And it becomes this very this is your fault, instead of maybe we both have issues that we need working on.
Yeah, so the broken parts of each other start slamming into each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then you end up, running down business as usual, which is fuck you or shut down or run away or,
Yes.
all the shit that we normally do that we did while using or using, is a great way to deal with these things. I mean, I know we've all, picked a fight with your significant other so you could go do your thing.
Right.
Like I'm the only person who did that.
Well,
But
I always found like, my relationship has been strained obviously through my drug use and whatnot. But like when, Sarah and I have an agreement, like I'm working my process and she's working hers. And before it was, I was trying to work hers and she was trying to save me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was like, I'm diving in all her shit and she's just trying to save me, the addict, right? You're my project, not my, you're my pet project, not my significant other.
Totally.
Is how I was with her. And I allowed it because it's great to be taken care of and don't have to worry about anything and no accountability. And, it was a very codependent, I wasn't partaking in part of the relationship.
Yeah. And we have some stuff in the book about, the Bermuda Triangle of enabling, where basically you're either the person who gets enabled or the other side, where you're the enabled, so there's just somebody who does it a little bit more passively, oh, save me, a little baby bird who needs fed. Or there's, my version of this where I'm just a fucking button pusher and I know exactly how to get what I want and I know what button pushing you to get it, so you'll just do the shit for me. Right. And I can remain entitled in whatever the fuck version of that I want to be.
Right.
But thinking about it, like what drives those behaviors? What allows me to take care of everybody else? And then what makes them want to run in and save the day? There's a huge piece of our identity that gets wrapped up in the dynamics that we used to have. Like think about your life. I always think about it like a Broadway play. Like when you were using, and either of you guys, when you were using and you were back in your old version of yourself, who were you? I was the black sheep of my family. I was, the drunk, or I was the drug addict, or I was the problem child, or I was the whoever the hell I was.
Mm-hmm.
So who were you in that old relationship? Well, on the other side of that equation, our family also plays a very specific role. Oh, I'm the fixer, or I'm the enabler, or I'm the helper, or I'm going to go in and make everything right.
Right.
Or I'm the martyr, oh, poor me, let me give of myself so you can benefit. And I'm not trying to be a smartass about it, but I think we both had these very specific roles that we played out in our old life. Well, now think about it. We've come into our recovery programs and we've done a lot of work on ourselves and we've become this very different version of ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so what we've done silently without a word being said is we have forced them into change. Because without us fulfilling our role, well then who are they? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and I see a lot of families start to sabotage your recovery. Ever seen that where families, you're the one who wanted me to get clean, but now you're like, oh, you still need to go do that. You still need to go to them meetings. You still need to talk to your counselor.
Right.
You sure? Maybe you don't need to go. And I don't think it's conscious, but I think it's an attempt to recreate the old dynamics where I had an identity. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like what? Like, oh no, why don't you need me?
Yeah. Because without your brokenness, who am I? How I can't fix something that's not there to be fixed. Right. How can I open up this door to change when I don't even, when, like, we've done a lot of work. And they may not even identify that as there is some sort of an issue. The reality is most of our families get as addicted to our chaos and our weirdness as we do to dope. Like, I don't know if any, I've seen family members where, you'll have one addict in the family who's a kid and all of the focus goes on to essentially the squeaky wheel, the problem, mm-hmm. and the other kids get kind of felt like they're left behind or they're not identified with. Or they can't be seen, because so much attention is focused on the one who's problematic.
Problematic, right.
And everybody else feels left behind. And now that, an addict comes in and gets clean and becomes a very different version of themselves, all of those things that people used to do for us aren't really necessary. I don't need fixed. I don't need you to run in and save the day because, my ass isn't on fire every 10 minutes the way it used to be.
So both people really are losing their identity in the relationship.
Yeah.
So,
totally.
the addict and the the other person that was watching all the craziness.
Yeah. And so how do you, I mean, so like Elyse, you were talking about, like, not speaking about yourself, but I know that you were involved with someone who wasn't who wasn't an addict, who may not get it. Like, addicts do some crazy counterintuitive shit. You're going to do something that's going to destroy your life. You know it, and you're going to willingly do it.
Yeah.
So people don't really pay attention to it.
There's also this really cool blessing of recovery that, like, it doesn't make us perfect human beings, but it gives us the gift of awareness.
Totally.
And awareness that I don't think that many non-addict people have.
Yeah, I mean,
like, we can't, if we're overwhelmed, if we're stressed, if we're dealing with grief, if we're depressed, we can't use anything. We can't escape with any substance. And the average person can go to work all day, come home, have a beer, like, completely stay on a surface level. Never really have to, like, go down beneath that. And we are, like, forced to look at that because we can't escape.
Yeah.
And sometimes we do escape with, like, people and activities and stuff, but, like, we're taught in recovery to have that awareness around it.
Yeah, it's like I was listening to somebody talking on a podcast about how they can't unsee things once you've seen them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a part of this, once you gain the awareness that you've talked about, there is an expectation that I can't not participate in anymore. I mean, I'll joke with my significant other about, somebody will piss me off and I'll be like, oh, fuck them, they deserve whatever. Where's the spiritual principle in that? I'm like, no, the spiritual principle of fuck you.
Yeah.
But, we can't, but it's, we joke about it, but the reality behind it is everything that we did in our old lives worked really well in our old lives. Lying and manipulating and cheating and getting over on people, because I lived a very transactional lifestyle, which was just of the moment. It's come up a lot lately where I started, if any of us were to talk about, Elyse, do you know what you're doing next Tuesday? Probably with some realm of reality. Yeah, I probably got a good idea. A week from Thursday, you probably have an idea what's going on in your life, right? With some
Yeah, sure.
rational reality.
Right. Yeah.
In the life of an active using addict, it is these short blocks of moment to moment to moment to moment. Long-term planning is 3:00 this afternoon. If that far away.
Right.
And so when you're living in this very just literally minute to minute, moment to moment existence, like if I've been using a lot and I'm gonna get fucking dope sick essentially, in a amount of hours, I have one focus: to avoid that consequence, and I'm going to do anything I can to make that not happen. There's no planning about tomorrow or next week or,
right.
3 weeks from Sunday. It's what am I going to do today, right now, and here. And my old thinking, I was really good at that. I was very good at problem solving. I was very good at handling shit in the moment. And I was very good at dealing with the short-term ramifications. Like, why does it matter to lie to somebody when I only give a fuck what's going to happen in the next 2 hours? Is it going to get me what I want in the immediate near future? In the next 15 minutes to 90 minutes. I'll deal with the problems that it brings up later. And it's just moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. Well, when I've been living that way for long, long periods of time, now I've got to start looking at the fact that I need to start, paying attention to the world around me in a different way. And how I respond to other people are very different. So not dragging the residue of my old life into today, is what we're talking about. Like, I can't exist on the ways that I used to operate. I need to be able to open up my eyes to see that the person I want to be operates under a different set of operating procedures, basically.
Yeah, and getting out of that mindset is really hard, because sometimes we just think it was like running to the substance was the problem. But, like, we still can run to things that feel better in the short term. Like, even emotions, like, it feels better for me to be angry at you right now than to think about how, if I'm pissed off at you right now, how's that going to affect our relationship next week?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. because I am getting my needs met right now, and I'm an addict. I want my shit right now. You know, so think of how do you actually catch your family up to, or your relationship, or the people around us into who we are now. Now, there's kind of two sides to this, I think. I mean, there's the people that knew us on both sides of this equation. They knew me in my old life, and they know me now. But then there's the people that only have known me in recovery. Which is, I think, a little bit about what you're talking about, is somebody never even knew the old version of Elyse. But then can we use, to think about it, how do you filter who's in your life now? How do I know who's the best person to choose for me to be in a relationship with, or to involve myself with in my life? And is it based on, do we have an alignment of beliefs? When you think about the person you were just talking about, with no names included, do you guys truly see things eye to eye? Or with,
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
And, something that I learned, always as an addict, I've always wanted to be like, look, this is just what's going on with me. I want you to understand me. This is where I'm coming from. And that's still the self-centered addict thinking. If I want to be able to share who I am and say what's going on with me, I need to be able to say what's going on with you? How are you feeling? It's being the bigger person first. If I am always trying to explain where I'm coming from, I'm not really I'm trying to still get that self-validation instead of being hey, I want to hear where you're coming from. What's life like for you? In order to open those doors. And that's the hard part about people too sometimes, right? Is sometimes you open that door and they're like, fuck you. And then you realize, I've done everything I can and now it's time to let go. But the people that I think should be in your life, you can have that conversation with, and it will go somewhere.
Yeah, finding people that can actually be reflective enough to look themselves in the mirror and be like, wow, do I like that version of me or no? Is this a pain in the, does this still serve me? Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. Depends on who you are. But to think behind what drives, I always think about what the drivers of people's actions are. What's actually, if you're a mom who's enabling, I've talked to a lot of parents who, I'll just give them one more 20, or I'll just give them one thing, just at this one time. That has everything to do with them and nothing to do with the person that they're actually enabled.
Yeah.
Guilt and shame and just, I know, and I know a lot of parents who, who take a lot of responsibility for the actions of the addicts they have in their life.
Sometimes it's just a lack of understanding. They don't, the lack of knowledge, right? Before recovery, we didn't know, oh, I'm a manipulator. I'm actively enabling this person. We didn't have those thoughts. And so other people that didn't have addiction problems, who aren't in recovery, definitely haven't learned, oh, right now I'm being the savior to make myself feel better. It's all things that take willingness to have self-growth. And I can't come to anybody else and be like, I've noticed that you're enabling me, right? Because now I'm blaming. Yeah. I have to be like, this is what I know of what's going on with me. How can we do this differently? What would you like?
Yeah, how can you walk in? I think there's a piece to this to where you've actually got to see what's driving your actions.
Yeah.
I've talked to a lot of parents who come in and like, God, if I would have just gone to one more soccer game, if I would have showed up for that one school play, if I'd have just done a little bit more, maybe this wouldn't be the outcome. Mm-hmm. And that's, I can't think of a time that that's ever been the case. I mean, not the authority on this, but is there anything that your parents could have done that could have changed your outcome, Elyse?
I would say I could say, oh, if this event hadn't happened, I don't know where I'd be or how that would have turned out.
Mm-hmm.
But I also understand that, like, my parents are just as human as I am.
Mm-hmm.
And things just happen in life.
Yeah.
And life is messy, you know, and that doesn't mean that my entire addiction is my dad's fault for leaving my mom.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
Yeah. I mean, there's not. I mean, would you think there's anything you could have done that would have changed the outcome from where you ended up? Like, could your folks made some different decision or showed up in some different way?
Oh, no. I mean, you know, I think you know, Elyse hit the nail on the head. I mean, you know, and that's part of working this program. You find out, you know, your parents are human too, and they make mistakes, and, you know, there's got to be a little forgiveness and awareness there. But it's, you know, I watch, since we're talking about codependent, like, I watch my mother is hugely feels responsible for my addiction. I mean, my mother was amazing. Right, like you couldn't ask for a better mother. She was incredible, and like for somehow she just feels like I did something wrong and I totally ruined you and blah blah blah. And yes, things happen, but you know, there's nothing that my parents could have done different that would have stopped me from being an addict and doing the things that I did, because I did it well out of their house, and you know, and I started using drugs at a later age when I was out of their house. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot, like, it's funny, the more I've worked on my own recovery, the more I've seen, you know, my dad was a raging alcoholic his entire life, you know, and now, I mean, I used to resent him for a lot of that shit, but now I'm just like, oh, I get it. You're fucked up just like me, you know, except at a different stage of the game where, you know, in small-minded little towns in the world that we were living in the 70s or whenever, you know, obviously dated myself with that, but, you know, could have you had the same outcome as I did? I don't know. I don't know if you could have. You know, I mean, anything is possible, but to see beyond, you know, our self-imposed limitations, I think is important, you know, to look at, great, that's who they were. That's what maybe drove their actions, you know. We pass along this emotional fucking bag of shit from generation to generation. You know, there's this huge piece of this that I think we're, you know, like my mom never drank a day in her life. Her mom never drank a day in her life. But my great-grandpa was this massively abusive, drunken asshole who used to beat the shit out of everybody. Mm-hmm. And my grandma took this stance like, I don't want to learn that, but she didn't pass that along. But there were still traits that came along down the chain that were passed along to, you know, my mom and then to me and to my brother and, you know, down to the next generations, where if we don't... I mean, what I love about recovery is you can make a stance where you can actually say, wow, I don't want to participate in my life that way anymore. And I may be the first person in the entire generations of my family who make a meaningful change and can try to stop the tide of this wave of bullshit who's traveled through our
that's where
lives for generations.
I mean, that's, you know, at some point you got to be responsible for your own stuff. I mean, as addicts, we hate doing that, but at some point when, you know, you work your program, you come to find out that it is all me, you know, the decisions that I've made, not the decisions my parents made, you know, it's the decisions I made growing up and wanted to go off and do, and, you know, they protected me the best they could, and, you know, life happened, you know.
I mean, there's a, go ahead.
I was just thinking, like the other side of that same coin, like what Nick was saying, is like, also, if I have to believe that if my human parents can be forgiven for mistakes, I can be forgiven for my mistakes too.
Yeah, so finding forgiveness, that's a huge, I mean, that's a topic unto itself.
Right. That's the hardest thing, forgiving ourselves. Yeah. At least for me.
Well, I mean, and then going, I mean, kind of finishing this last idea is like, you know, I want to create a different outcome in my life, but that means I also need to explain who I am to the world around me now. Why is it important that I do the things that I do? Why do I need it, you know, if you're involved in a 12-step program, why do you go there? You know, if you need to set boundaries to certain people in your life, what does that look like? Like, recovery is really fucking hard to figure out when you've lived it, let alone to somebody on the other side of the equation who has no clue about any of these dynamics. So how do you catch them up to who you are now? how do you sit down and have a meaningful conversation about, what this was like? Like if you were to told me when I came into early recovery that sitting down with my mom telling her, that at one stage I was an IV meth user would have brought us closer, I would have thought you're out of your goddamn mind. But at the end of the day, now granted, I want to keep clear to anybody who's listening to this, I don't know your family. And you need to make the effective best decisions that if your family or somebody who's going to weaponize the things that you tell them, that is not who I'm talking about. Right. But if you have family you can talk with that have a healthy point of view that are trying to actually understand and figure out and participate and be active participants in a healthy way in your life, and you can sit down. I mean, you ever tried this? Sit down with your family members and say, hey, can I talk to you for a second? When the energy's low and it's calm, and say, hey, what was it like dealing with me and my addiction?
Oh, yeah.
And shut your mouth and open your ears and listen to what they have to say without judgment or without, ridicule or blaming. That is a really hard thing to do,
Yeah, and that I feel like that's part of like recovery teaches us to be the bigger person. Like I can't come into the room and be like, hear me. I'm going to explain everything going on in my life so that you understand me and validate me. It's coming in and being like, help me understand you, first of all. Let me put my own feelings about needing validation and understanding aside for a second.
Yeah. And to get to that, and it kind of brings into, the reality of what you were talking about before. Now, I don't want to make this a 12-step meeting, but, the first thing everybody wants to do is run out and say, I'm sorry, and make an amends.
Right.
But the reality of those steps is it's not number 1, it's number 9 for a reason. Because if I don't look at all of the things that brought me to making the decisions where I caused that massive amount of harm, then it's just an empty promise. And literally when you talk about making an amends with someone, it's not to say sorry, it means to mend. And that's done, by an actual change of actions that you're not repeating. To look at all of the reasons that you've gone through that, and we can figure that out.
Yeah, and like look at it the other way too. Like for me, I have to be like, how long does it take for me to trust somebody?
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't want someone to come running and saying, I'm sorry, just so they can feel comforted by me being like, it's okay when it's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would want the same thing. I would want to see someone living a different way over time. It's the same thing I would expect.
Yeah, to have some proof in the pudding, to really be able to make a meaningful change to a relationship, because a lot of, I think a lot of addicts really realize how much damage we've actually done to other people, and I'm not saying this with more ammo to kick your own ass, because I think we're all good enough at that, but the fact of reality is we have, I used to say, what do you care? I'm only hurting myself. What does it matter? But the reality is we do affect other people, my mom had to remind me, like she lives in Colorado and I live in Albuquerque. And when most people see the news in Albuquerque, what's the one thing that comes to your mind?
Violent crimes.
Yeah, violent crimes and shootings and murders. And, there's a huge, massive crime problem. And I never took into consideration when I was living on the streets here, when she was sitting there watching the news going, oh my God, is that Mark? Oh my God, is that guy flying on the side? Is that him? Like that stress and that high level anxiety and stress that we impose on people by living the life that we live, And so the byproducts of what come with that for all of the significant others in our life is, I think trust is given the first time. I think it's earned thereafter.
Right.
And so we're all in a stage, like I remember going to my mom, come on, Mom, I've been clean for a month now. Trust me. Don't worry about the 35 years that came before that. That shouldn't count anymore.
Right.
But the reality is it does take time. So how can we effectively start to do that? I mean, I always want people to walk away from this thing with something they can apply to their life today.
Well, I feel like we may not get that validation or like understanding from the people that we've hurt in the past. We're not gonna get that right away, but we do get that from each other. Mm-hmm. Like I can tell another person in recovery, mm-hmm. I feel like I'm not good enough because of my past, and people aren't ready to trust me again. And they can be like, I get you, I understand you, I feel you, I'm gonna sit here in your pain with you.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, is so important to being able to get to point where I can make amends is because I felt understood and validated for who I am with a network of people for a while.
Yeah, with some people who get it. And you're not just, a huge part of the life of an addict is isolation. I always wanted to spend my time by myself because you'd want me to share my dope, and I don't want to do that.
Right. Well, the other side of that, for me anyway, is like, it all comes down to self-love and self-esteem and things like that. And so how do you gain self-esteem is by doing estimable things. And I literally go mine on a 24-hour basis. And I live my life right now. That's all I do is like, did I do my best today? And if I can do that, then I can live with myself today. And no matter what comes in front of me, moving forward, that I can hold my head up high because I'm not living in shame anymore. I'm not. If I had a job right now, but I do show up to work. I am absurd. I do the things that I'm asked to do. Am I trusted in by my girlfriend at home? Absolutely not. And I shouldn't be. Then that's the honest to God truth. But when we go to sleep at night, I know, we have that conversation like, honey, you did the right things today and I'm proud of you and you're working forward and I see what you're doing. And for me, that's enough. And that's got to be enough. Like I said, this holiday season, last holiday season, my mother was searching for me at the morgue and calling the police stations looking for her son. That's a horrible thing to do. And this year that didn't happen. My mom calls today, I pick up the phone no matter what I'm doing because I made that deal with her that she wouldn't have to, it scares the hell out of her when she doesn't hear from her son. Yeah. So doing those little things, and I can get rest my head at night knowing that I did the best I could do today, and therefore moving forward when those times do come and you start gaining that trust back, you do it on an admirable basis in myself that I know that I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And having that humility to be like, I'm not trusted right now, and that's actually what I maybe not like what I deserve, but like that's the natural consequence. Right. And like I'm gonna accept that. But like, yeah, there are like small wins that are happening all the time that are building toward where I want to go.
Totally.
I like that.
In our church recovery path books, there's a tool called the counterbalancing the weight of our past. And it's like you come into recovery when we have this huge, everybody understands scales, but you got this huge bunch of behaviors that have weighted down people's perception of who we are and what we've dealt with. But then I've come in here, I've been clean for a week, I've been clean for a month. That does not counterweight the years of my life when I lied and cheated and manipulated and stole and did all of the negative, nasty shit.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean that can't be, that these scales can't be balanced out, but a big piece of this is time and patience. Right. It is to know that, I am not going to make one or two acts that are going to right all of the things that I've ever done. Right. But I can show up consistently, I can be transparent, I can be honest, I can be dependable, my actions can match my words, I can do all of the things that I've talked about to become basically a version of I want to become for myself, and then as the world around us sees it, that's what they see. Yeah,
and like I have hope that even though I don't know what that looks like, that it's going to happen because I see all these other people in recovery that it's happened or happening for who've put in the work over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that the possibility of this is, I think we all feel like we're alone in the situations we've had. There's a book I've read by somebody named Kat Hoke. It's called Defy Venture. She does this program for guys in prison. I'm trying to summarize this, but she always talks about, I don't think someone should be defined by the worst thing they've ever done. And I really, truly agree with that. I think everybody now, some people got caught, but would you want to be defined? If you just could talk to yourself in your own head and you could look at the worst thing you've ever done in your life that at least you know about, it doesn't matter if the rest of the world knows about it or if you got caught doing, would you want to be defined by that one point in time in the rest of your life? And that's the really fucking hard part about most people that end up in the legal system or end up in a lot of things, they are defined by who they once were,
Right.
not who. Now they still may be that person. Don't get me wrong. If you're still doing those shady ass things, then maybe that's still who you are. But if you've made a meaningful change to want to make motion in your life to move in a different direction, you know, I'm not saying there shouldn't be accountability for the actions we've taken. We're grown ass men and women. We need to, you know, we've made our bed. Sometimes we have to lie in it. But the reality of that is, you know, is there a place where you can actually move in a new direction? You know, I talk with families, they're like, hey, all right, I'm going to give you a chance. But yet they sit and they literally micromanage, or they scrutinize every action waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I know that's a result of so many broken promises or so many other things. But when somebody comes in and makes a meaningful desire to want to do things differently, can you actually offer them an open opportunity to do so without just waiting for the failure to come? You know, because that sets it up for that failure to happen. You know. You know. So what's driving so back to, you were talking about codependency. For you, what drives that behavior? Why do you give to other people to the extent that you actually harm yourself?
I think it's like that, like I'm always trying to look for ways to escape the painful things of reality. Like, oh, this emotion might hurt. Oh, this relationship might not have been a great idea. Oh, I might have to breathe through my anxiety. Like, no, I'm gonna fight for a relationship where the person that I have problems with is the person who comforts me at night. You know, I'm going to smoke a cigarette instead so that I'm anxious again later instead of breathing. I'm going to, you know, call into work because it, feels better to, sit in my misery and be comforted by movies. You know, it's just, it's all of this, avoidance of the harsher parts of reality. And so I have to, be okay with accepting those things, which I think is kind of what we were talking about this whole time, is I need to accept that I've done things in the past that don't feel so good. I need to, you know, that's one aspect of it. And, you know, for me, just being able to do small things at a time, I can't change all of that in one day, but before I smoke a cigarette, let me just do this 7-minute guided meditation and just see what it does for me. I can do that. I can handle that. And that's the beginning of acceptance of whatever's happening in the moment for me.
Yeah, and find some acceptance or find an ability to, a lot of mine ends up being, you know, a lack of self-worth. So I'm trying to gain validation from other people. You know, let me fix you and then I'll be good. Let me make your world right and then that I must be noble. Let me do something for you as an attempt to fix something in me. You know what I mean? You know, and I think all of us end up in these attracted by our own broken parts or our own broken patterns or our own childhood realities. You know, we seek out our parents, as they say. You know.
Yeah, it's there's this puzzle and there's a puzzle piece that's missing, and we're just walking around waiting for that puzzle piece to go back in, which is the same fucked up thing as before.
Yeah. We find the broken piece of my puzzle to shove my hand so I can feel whole again, or at least feel like the version of me that I used to be. I mean, there's a lot that comes with, you know. I mean, when you think about the life of an addict, what you're asking them to do is you know, give up emotional support, give up, you know, their problem solving things, give up their social standing, give up, you know, all of their known ways of dealing with the world, and basically stand here naked. You know.
Yeah.
And then do that while you're trying to define what does a healthy relationship look like with someone else, you know, or what is it like to show up in a way that's actually not codependent or actually has boundaries or actually is, you know, something that could be a meaningful existence, on top of all those other things, it might be a good reason why it's highly suggested to stay out of relationships for the first year or so of your recovery,
Yeah, and it's like, it's hard, right? It's hard to be like, I'm gonna sit with this hole in my puzzle and like try to be okay with it, instead of like, that looks like that's gonna fit in my puzzle. Let me, like, if I want to try and put it there and see if it fixes it, because it's just like, we always are naturally wanting to do whatever the quickest, fastest, easiest thing is. That's kind of just how our brains have been hardwired, and so we have to like constantly override that.
Sometimes we like to stick a square peg in a round hole. It just doesn't fit.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the round peg in the square hole most times.
Yeah.
So, thinking about basically what we both just talked about. You talked about how do we show up differently in the relationships we've had? How do I not end up codependent? How do I not engage in the behaviors that I've always had? So what we talked about today, for one is creating a new relationship with the people that we're around. To me, starting by, I want to ask you guys, how do you actually do that? What has been the most important ways you've learned to do that? To me, for mine, have been sitting down and talking with my family about who I'm trying to be now. Like, what does this mean to actually live a life in recovery? How can I show up differently? How can we not repeat our old patterns and doing it at a time when we can actually both hear each other? It was probably one of the most important things. What's been the most important thing that you can take away from learning and having healthy relationships you got in your life?
Well, like you just said it. It's doing the next right thing. As you start this trudge and you said you didn't want to make a step in, but working a program and working to be on, like not lying about anything. That's a hard thing for me because, for so long programmed just to like, are you going to the store? Yeah, I'm going to the store. No, I'm not. I'm going to the dope house. No, that just like simple things like that. Yeah. And just being honest and forthright and like I said, picking up the phone when my mom calls. Those little things, they make a difference. And at first I'm like, this is so stupid. But to them, because I didn't live like that before. I lied everywhere I go. I ignored people. I hid. I manipulated. I did all those things. And today, I don't. I'm very honest and forthright, even if it hurts.
Yeah. And one of those by themselves, you're right, won't make a difference.
Right.
But a lot of those transparencies over time make a huge difference.
Yeah.
So, Elyse, what would be the biggest thing you've taken away that could help with the conversation we talked about today?
I like what Nick was saying about kind of like sticking to like one day at a time, or like what is the next thing at this time, that's and the aspect of like I'm gonna do that anyways, even if it hurts. But also I know that there are people around me in recovery who can make it a little bit easier when it does hurt. I just have to turn to them.
Yeah. And I love that. So, I really want to recap the ideas because I want people to walk away every single time they listen to this with something they can apply to their life today. And for me, it's sitting down and talking with people. It's being transparent about the actions and the things that I do. And then my actions match my words. And then I'm consistent, and then I take what I can do, not worrying about what I'm going to do 6 months from now, but what can I do today? What can I do right now in this moment, in this situation, at this time, that can actually be very different than the way that I was living before? Mm-hmm. That's healthy and is kind and is in service to the person that I wanted to be. So, cool. I appreciate you guys taking the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
That's great.
All information and other content supplied or communicated in or through this video is for general informational purposes only and does not nor is intended to constitute legal or medical advice. Any viewer of this video should contact his or her own attorney, doctor, or other applicable advisor or practitioner to obtain legal, medical, or other applicable advice with respect to the accuracy, reliability, or potential application to such viewer of any matter discussed or portrayed in this video. Please do not act or refrain from acting in any way based on any information or content supplied or communicated in or through this video. The views expressed during this video are those of the individual presenters only and not those of Choice Recovery Path LLC or any of its customers, suppliers, or affiliates. Any liability with respect to actions taken or not taken by any viewer based on any information or content supplied or communicated in or through such video is hereby expressly disclaimed. All such information or content is expressly provided as is and free of any representation or warranty of any kind.